Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here. Got another Master Duel video for you, coming at you with another tier list. Now that the latest selection pack has been out for a little while, I wanted to make an updated tier list for the current metagame. So I have featured here 30 of the most popular and powerful decks in the current metagame. Because I'm also separating variants of decks into their own different categories for the tier list, there's not really enough room to include like every single deck that I think is feasible in the meta. Otherwise the rogue tier would be a lot bigger than it's going to end up being. So there's going to be some decks that are very viable that are not featured here, just for the sake of time and brevity. But let's go ahead and get right on into it. I'm going to start right at the top here with Blue Eyes, which I'm going to put in tier 2, but I think it's definitely going to end up being lower in tier 2 than it has been in the past once I get more things on here, right? Blue Eyes reminds me a lot of Sword Soul. It's a synchro-based deck that has a fairly simple combo line that is actually still fairly powerful. That said, it is also kind of like Sword Soul in that it doesn't really need any major hits as far as its, status as a deck and its power level in the meta. It doesn't need any hits on the ban list because it's naturally going to get power crept out of the meta over time. We've honestly already been seeing that with Blue Eyes for quite a while, and it's definitely going to continue happening moving forward. Alright, next up we have the Dragonmaid variant of Dracotail. These aren't in here in any particular order. I just threw the images into the tier list maker and they all came out like this, so we're just going to tackle them in the order they come. So for Dragonmaid Dracotail, I think I'm going to put this towards the top of tier 2. I think Dracotail variants are really strong, and you're definitely going to see some other ones in tier 1. I think that the Dragonmaid variant is one of the slightly weaker variants, mostly because the Dragonmaid engine is a little bit weaker than other engines like Branded or Magistus. But it's still a very strong deck. Dracotail has hugely bolstered what Dragonmaid can be capable of in this current meta. I will say also Dragonmaid is by far the Dracotail variant I'm least familiar with. And if you wanted to put this like towards the bottom of tier 1, I really wouldn't fault you, but I'm going to leave it at the top of tier 2, mostly for the Dracotail aspect more than the Dragonmaid, but definitely still a solid deck. Okay, so it's actually kind of nice that these two are next to each other. I have White Forest is going to be represented by Diabel here, and then this portrait of Azamina is going to represent the Azamina sort of control decks that are using a lot of spell or trap cards. So we're going to start with White Forest, which I definitely still think is a tier 1 deck in this meta, or tier 2. Sorry, it's a tier 2 deck in this meta, and it'll be definitely towards the top of tier 2. Do I think it's better than the Dragonmaid variant of Dracotail? And I think it honestly might be. Well, okay, here's the thing. I think the big thing that White Forest has going against it is how weak it is to Droll and Lockbird. That said, there is a chance that you might see fewer Droll and Lockbirds in this metagame because of how, honestly, not great it is going into Dracotail. So that might actually be a bit of a buff for White Forest if less people are going to be running Droll and Lockbird. Another hand trap to be thinking about going into this meta is Retaliating Sea. That's something you're going to see a lot of people on in order to counter Dracotail as it's becoming more and more popular. Which doesn't really affect, I think, too badly, either White Forest or Blue Eyes, but Dragonmaid Dracotail, of course, being a Dracotail variant, will be affected by it. I'll leave White Forest here for now. I might end up swapping this around a bit. As for Azamina variants that are, not featuring White Forest cards that, again, have a bunch of spell or trap cards that they all want to send to the graveyard, I'm going to put that, I think, I want to say either top of Rogue, or maybe I'll put it lower in tier 3. I might put it down in Rogue later, but it's a solid deck, and it's put up some amount of results. I've seen it on ladder myself, but definitely not as powerful, I think, as just the regular White Forest Azamina. Okay, we have Cristron. I'm going to put in tier 3 yet again. I put it here last time, and I think it's still mostly true. Cristron's a really solid deck. It's just really hampered not only by Droll in a lot of scenarios, not every scenario, but in a lot, but also is kind of getting power crept a little bit in the current metagame. Monarch is actually maintaining more popularity than I thought it would following the latest wave of support it got, but I still think it is a pretty dedicated rogue deck. Alright, here I have the Man with the Mark representing Odeon, which, honestly, I have not run into this deck once on Ranked Ladder. I have not seen people really talking too much about it in comparison to Dracotail either. I think that if Odeon had been featured in, like, the last pack, it would definitely be a more played and talked about deck, but I feel like Dracotail is kind of overshadowing it right now. I'm definitely willing to put it in tier 2. I think it's pretty comparable to Blue Eyes. I'll leave it here for now. Alright, Centurion, I think, is definitely still a tier 3 deck. Not much has really changed there. Archmage is another archetype that has debuted in the latest selection pack. And this one, I think, is pretty firmly Rogue. I'm going to put it even lower than Monarch. I know I said in my crafting guide that I thought Archmage was an upper Rogue deck. But I'll admit I was kind of hedging upward a little bit for 2 reasons. 1, I didn't know a lot about Archmage. And 2, I just saw a world where I put it in lower Rogue and people were like, no, Archmage is great. And not really having an argument against that, I'd be like, well, I don't know, maybe it is. But what I can tell just reading the cards, it really seems a bit of a clunky deck. And the end board is, I mean, you get a negate, you get the option of board wipe, but it's not really anything super special that other decks can't do and honestly do better. That said, Magistus the Pure might still be used in upcoming future archetype in a better position, but I think for Archmage, I think it's pretty comparable to Monarch. It might even be a little bit worse, honestly. Okay, Tearlaments is mostly going to be the variant that has a Gem Knight package in it. But because there's not many variants of Tearlament, like different ones, I just have it all as one archetype here. I kind of want to put this at the top of tier 3. Mostly just because I've been seeing it less and less lately. I'll leave it here for now, but I might change my mind later. Okay, so Mitsurugi Ryzeal. For now, I'm going to put in tier 1, but this might be my bottom of tier 1 right here. This might be the deck, like maybe the line between Mitsurugi Ryzeal and White Force is what separates tier 1 and 2. I don't know. I am a little tempted to put this at the top of tier 2. I think that it is definitely the weaker Ryzeal variant between that and Onomot Ryzeal, but I'll put it at the bottom of tier 1 for now. Stun, as always, I'm just going to throw in Rogue. Yeah, I mean, as more and more floodgates get hit, which is not unwarranted in my opinion, stun gets worse over time, but the Morganite cards did give it a little bit of a boost, so it's still been seeing a decent bit of popularity there. I think Mitsurugi Orcust is definitely better than Mitsurugi Ryzeal for sure. I think Orcust in general is still slightly better than Ryzeal, because again, one of the metrics I'm basing the power level of these decks on, not the only metric, but honestly one of the more prevailing ones, is how well does this deck handle hand traps. I think in this current meta, in 2025 Yu-Gi-Oh!, that is going to be the big question, because I've noticed that a lot of decks tend to have the same number of starters nowadays. So it's more of a question of how good is the end board and how able are you to push through hand traps. That's a lot of what I'm factoring in. Consistency is still a factor, definitely for sure, but yeah, I think when I think about that, Orcust in general is better than Ryzeal, in my opinion right now. Only by a little bit, but still better. Voiceless Voice, I'm gonna put in tier 3, honestly more towards the top. Remains a very solid deck and a fairly underplayed one in Master Duel, I think mostly for how expensive it is. I know I've tried to build Voiceless a couple of times and I just never get enough URs to justify dumping more gems into it. Oh, branded. This is pure branded, not branded Dracotail, but still a very, very good deck in this metagame. I'll put it a little bit above Blue Eyes and Odeon in tier 2. Fiendsmith Control, I'm going to put in tier 2, but I'll put it between Blue Eyes and Odeon. A little bit more towards the bottom here. And Sky Striker. I think I'm willing to put it more in the middle, like upper middle of tier 2. I think it's still a really, really solid control deck right now. Labyrinth, I think Labyrinth stocks have gone up by quite a bit with Dracotail being so popular and Dimensional Barrier calling fusions being so prominent right now. Just looking at all of these that I placed recently, because I kind of did them in quick succession, but I think I like this, yeah. I might do this. I think I have decided that no, I'll keep it like this, that's fine. Okay, so here we have Magistus Dracotail. In my opinion, this is a very underexplored variant of Dracotail. I think because a lot of people TCG side, like in English-speaking countries, right, are not used to playing with Spenta because Spenta is still not been released in the TCG. I think that's why branded Dracotail has kind of become the default way to play. I'm not saying that I think branded Dracotail is worse. I think it and Magistus are probably about equal power level. But I do feel that Magistus Dracotail is probably underplayed. Maybe not underrated, but definitely being underplayed. Just the sheer amount of branded Dracotail I see being played in comparison. But I do think that Magistus Dracotail is a tier 1 deck, and I'm actually going to put it above both Orcust and Ryziel. I think that in general, when it comes to, you know, the variants with engines, I think that Dracotail is going to be stronger than Orcust and Ryziel. While it doesn't put up as many disruptions on the end board, it's a lot more layered. Arguably, I mean, compared to Ryziel, Orcust is arguably a little more layered than Dracotail, but what Dracotail has over both decks is that it's really easy to play on the opponent's turn 1, or just on the opponent's turn in general with Dracotail. A lot more than even Orcust, right? Orcust kind of has the babble where if it gets destroyed or removed from the field, they can't really do anything else on the opponent's turn. But Dracotail always has options between the trap cards, between 5 mana, between Malulu, spheres, all that kind of stuff. So I really do think that Dracotail is the best deck in the metagame. So for pure Dracotail, this is going to be the variant running like King of the Swamp and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to put that at the top of tier 2 because it's not that... Or maybe I want this at the bottom of tier 1 and this at the top of tier 2. That looks a little bit better to me. It's not that I think that, like, pure Dracotail is bad. It's just that you're better off running an engine with it, right? Something to help support it, something to give it more options, more starters. Not that Dracotail needs that much help. They already have 12 in archetype starters, but Dracotail's already in a kind of deck that wants to play with other monsters in your hand. And so it's often better if instead of hand traps, you have something like Crowley to be able to send from hand, or Spent to distort your combos, or you know, in the branded side, you have the option to go for branded fusion and all the extract options that provides. We'll talk about that more a little bit later, but I think that pure Dracotail just doesn't have quite as much to do as the other variants, and that's why I think it's lower on the tier list here. Mitsurugi Fiendsmith. I think that's still definitely tier 1. I think the Mitsurugi decks are probably going to be on the lower end of tier 1, but I do think it is tier 1. Automat Ryziel, I'll put in lower tier 1 as well. Orcust Fiendsmith, I definitely think is better than the Mitsurugi variant still. Lunalite, whoa. It's actually pretty rough for Lunalite right now. I'm going to bump it down here, even lower than Branded and Labyrinth. Well... Yeah, I think that's... Well, I don't know, actually. Because I think Branded... Okay, so here's what I'm thinking, right? Lunalite is going to suffer from not only Droll and Lockbird, but also if people really do start playing Retaliating Sea and Mass, that's going to be a rough time for Lunalite. It's also going to be a rough time for Branded. But I think this placement is fine. Yeah, because I was tempted to put maybe Labyrinth over Branded a little bit. I think Labyrinth and Branded are like roughly equal power level right now. No, I think Branded's actually a little bit stronger. It's just the Retaliating Sea thing that's getting me. But Lunalite's already kind of fallen off in this meta. Because, like, yeah, the Light Dancer is a scary towers, but it's not too difficult to start the combo line leading up to it. And again, you know, if Retaliating Sea really does start to get a lot more use in this metagame, Lunalite's position is going to just keep falling down on the tier list. I think that's why it's not as popular in like best of 3, especially formats with side decks, because it just catches stray from people citing Retaliating Seas against Dracotail. Fiendsmith Gym Knight. I'll put in tier 2. Wow, there's a lot of decks in tier 2. I still think it's a really solid deck. This seems like a fine enough spot for it. Branded Dracotail, I'll put it in tier 1, and I will put it over the Magistus variant. Even though I think, in my opinion, these two variants are about equal power level, Branded is by far the more popular variant, and it really is a lot more popular. If you look at some of the stats on various websites, you can just see that so many more people, at least TCG side in English-speaking countries where this data is being aggregated, there's a lot more people on the Branded Dracotail. Again, I'm kind of thinking that people are not as used to playing the Magistus Dracotail, because if you look at OCG, right, Branded Dracotail was never really a thing there, like at all. It was pretty much always pure or the Magistus variant. Now, I'm still not sure how much of this is like, I guess, preferences across the different formats. It's really hard to suss out, honestly. I think the actual answer is probably, again, that these are about equal power level, and any nuance that might make one better than the other is going to be very, very slight. I'll still put branded dracotail a little bit higher just because it is so much more popular, but I really don't think it's that much worse than the Magistus variant or even pure at all. Honestly, branded dracotail really just adds a couple of starters to the main deck, but it adds a lot more options to the extra deck, and I think that's why a lot of people are really gravitated towards it, right? Because you can still go into Mirror Jade or Albion Sanctifier, which is definitely more appealing, I think, than using King of the Swamp to make like Dragoons or Blue Eyes Tyrant Dragon. But again, I still think that there's value in the Magistus variant being able to put out negates like Borreload Savage Dragon and Zorora, as well as the Iris, which can steal monsters and equip them as a quick effect. But time will tell. Maybe more people will hop on the Magistus, but we'll see. Okay, so Gem Knight, pure Gem Knight, as in going second in OTKing, I think is like somewhere around mid to upper tier 3 is a fair enough spot for it. Pure Mitsurugi, I think, is really comparable to Fiendsmith Mitsurugi. They're pretty much exactly the same power level. Malice, I've just not been seeing a ton of play at all. It's still a fine enough deck, I think, but you know, between how unpopular of a deck it was even before the ban list hits and how popular dracotail is, it's like that Toy Story meme where I don't want to play with you anymore, you know. So I'm going to put Malice, I think, in tier 3 like I did last time. I think somewhere about middle tier 3 is fine. And then Tenpai, I think, again, is pretty comparable to Gem Knight, but I think it's actually a slightly better going second deck. I'll put it a little bit higher in tier 3. Okay, there we have it. So like I said, there's actually a lot that's viable in this meta right now. I think that's evident by the fact that even though I have 30 different decks and their variants picked out here, only 3 of them even ended up in the Rogue tier. Now, it's still worth mentioning that decks in the Rogue tier are more than capable of hitting Master 1 and or topping a tournament. You just need to be a little bit more of a skilled / dedicated pilot. But so that said, there's a ton of decks that are in Rogue that can still do well in this meta. I think even with the introduction of Dracotail, this is still a pretty wide open meta. And I could see a lot of people making the argument that stuff like Orcust, Mitsurugi, and Ryzeal is all in tier 2 and that only Dracotail decks are tier 1. I do think there is a bit of recency bias happening right now. It is a very new deck. People have been really eager for the Justice Hunter archetype. So I think in a couple of weeks when things kind of settle down a little bit, we'll see that the meta starts to look a little bit more wide open with like more of these decks in tier 1 seeing play. But who knows? I could be wrong, and maybe time will tell. And maybe Dracotail really is just that much better than everything else. Definitely let me know what you think in the comments below. But I think for the time being, that's going to go ahead and do it for this one. So thanks as always for watching. Let us go ahead now and move on to our outro so we can thank our YouTube members and patrons. Hey everybody, Hexlex here. Thank you so very much for watching all the way to the very end of the video, which by the way is one of the best ways to support the channel. Speaking of supporting the channel, take a look at the names on screen. These are folks who have been so generous as to either join as a YouTube member or subscribe over on patreon.com/Hexlex to support. There's also perks for doing so. If you would like to see YouTube videos early, as well as some exclusive videos that get uploaded to YouTube, but for one reason or another I decide not to publish, definitely go ahead and hit that join button to see content early as well as some exclusive content. If you're looking for more exclusive content, over on patreon.com, I upload exclusive videos that are not posted on YouTube just about every single day. Whether you choose to subscribe over on Patreon, join as a YouTube member, or simply continue to watch, your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so very much. But for now, this is Hexlex. I am signing out, and I hope that you have a fantastic day.